Things start breaking all at once. A kettle cracks, a lamp dies, the phone battery drains faster. It's rarely just bad timing. Those small failures often signal that the routines holding you together are loosening, and that looseness usually comes right before a new life phase. You stop laughing at the same jokes. Old comforts feel thin, and you suddenly want different conversations, which shows your values and the people you seek are quietly shifting. So those social changes are a real clue to an internal reorientation. You find yourself cleaning a drawer at 3 in the morning. A midnight purge of clothes and old receipts isn't just busy work. It's a practical rehearsal for letting go and making space, a visible habit your brain uses to prepare for change. You start saying no to plans you used to accept. Turning down invites, changing your wardrobe, or dreaming about different work aren't random. They're boundary shifts that mean your identity is moving, and noticing these signals early gives you time to choose into the next chapter instead of being pulled into it. Shifts in daily routines and where your attention goes. Mornings tighten up when something new barges into your life. A waking hour that used to be lazy or flexible suddenly demands action, and that first hour sets the tone for everything that follows. For example, someone starting a new job might swap a slow coffee and new scroll for a packed commute and quick outfit decisions, which drains the time they use to spend journaling or exercising. A new parent similarly redistributes morning minutes to feeding and dressing a child, so late night reading or long showers disappear. Those small shifts in the first hour ripple outward. Less time for self-care means lower energy later, which then forces evening routines to compress. Your attention migrates, often without you noticing. Tasks that once occupied large chunks of your thinking now get nudged aside by immediate demands. A person who moves from independent contributor to team lead may find their mind constantly checking messages, planning meetings, and rehearsing conversations, so deep work windows shrink and creative projects stall. In another case, caregiving redirects mental bandwidth toward monitoring health schedules and appointments, making it harder to concentrate on hobbies that require uninterrupted focus. The cause is simple: limited cognitive capacity. So when priorities change, attention reallocates, and performance in sidelined areas often drops. Small environmental changes act like invisible steering wheels for your day. Where you place things, the route you take, even the timing of errands, all channel your attention differently. A commuter who starts driving a new route notices coffee shops or a gym that fit into the schedule, and those visual cues prompt new habits. A student who moves into campus housing positions a study lamp and notebooks in a visible spot, which pulls attention back to coursework between social events. These concrete shifts, where the backpack is left, where the keys sit by the door, create tiny triggers that either reinforce the new phase or fight it, and those triggers then shape what you notice and when. Social rhythms and appointments rewrite your week. The calendar fills with different names and types of commitments, and that changes who you think about and how often. Weekend brunches might drop away when weekend classes start, while recurring meetings with a project team take up mental real estate during weekdays. Someone transitioning to retirement may find weekdays suddenly quiet and must decide whether to spend attention on volunteer work, family time, or personal projects. The effect is cumulative. Repeated interactions tune your priorities, and spending more attention on certain people or roles slowly reshapes identity and daily choices. Emotional tipping points and quiet surprises. There's a small, steady pressure that builds before something actually changes, a tension that feels like a draft under a door. It starts as a string of moments, a Sunday night that looks different from the ones before, a text you don't feel like answering, a commute that suddenly feels longer than it is. Those ordinary irritations pile up until one day a single event, a terse email, a misplaced key, a trivial remark, lands like a tipping point and makes the undercurrent visible. Because small, repeated mismatches between what you do and what you want create emotional strain. The tipping point often arrives unexpectedly but is rooted in a pattern you could trace back through ordinary days. Sometimes the signals are quiet and oddly domestic. You swap your usual takeout for a half hour in the kitchen. You stop scrolling and start reading a book on a topic you never cared about. You find yourself decluttering a drawer without the usual guilt. These tiny choices are not dramatic. They are more like experiments in living differently. When new preferences show up in low-stakes contexts, they change the shape of the day and slowly reorient priorities. And that gradual drift makes a new life phase feel plausible without ever shouting. Emotional spikes are the blunt instruments of change. One unexpected sob on the subway. A burst of anger at a request you once handled with ease. A moment of pure, unaccountable joy that makes your chest tight. Those outsized feelings point to a mismatch between identity and circumstance. For example, someone who has worked late nights for years might suddenly break down after a routine meeting and hand in a resignation a week later. The breakdown didn't create the decision out of nowhere. It revealed the accumulated cost of holding two incompatible lives. There are cognitive signals too, and they look like attention being pulled in new directions. A person who's never thought about plants starts researching soil mixes during lunch breaks. A parent who once dreamed of stability suddenly wakes with plans for travel on the mind. The mind's new preoccupations reallocate mental energy. When you begin running through scenarios about another life while you wash the dishes, that mental rehearsal increases the odds you'll act. Those daydreams are practical in their own way because they lead to notes, searches, and small logistical tests that reshape possibilities. Bodies join the conversation without asking permission. Sleep patterns shift, appetite alters, the chest tightens or loosens on its own. Insomnia can feel like the brain's way of refusing the status quo, while easier sleep after a decision often signals alignment. For instance, someone nursing a long career decision may suddenly start waking earlier and feeling lighter after they hand in notice, not because the external situation changed alone, but because the body's stress economy reset in response to aligning action with feeling. Social echoes follow those internal shifts and make the change more real. Friends notice different jokes, partners notice different priorities, colleagues notice quieter disengagement. A colleague who used to join every after-work drink starts saying no more often. A spouse remarks that the person across the table seems to be reading a different kind of book. Those reactions create feedback loops. The quieter surprises prompt small social adjustments, which in turn validate the internal change and nudge behavior in the same direction until the new phase feels less like a possibility and more like the way things now are. Rewriting your social map, who you turn to and why. As roles shift in life, the people you lean on tend to change too. You start noticing that conversations that used to spark joy now feel off-key, and that happens because your emotional needs and day-to-day problems are not the same anymore. A new parent, for example, will suddenly prefer advice from the neighbor who brings over a spare crib part rather than the college friend who used to plan nights out. That practical shift causes a subtle rerouting of attention and time. Daily routines are a silent editor of friendships. When your work hours move or your commute disappears, the people you bump into by chance get replaced by those who match your new schedule. Someone who recently began night shifts finds themselves trading stories with other night workers on late breaks, while daytime friends slip into the background. Because proximity and shared context make empathy easier, contact fades where there's less overlap and strengthens where there is more. Different problems require different skills. You won't always turn to the same person for career advice, grief, or assembling furniture, and that's simply because people offer different forms of support. A sibling might become the logistical go-to during a parent's illness because they can manage paperwork, while an old friend remains the person who knows your history and can keep you grounded. When friends can't meet the specific need, say, clinical level anxiety, you may look for a therapist or a support group, which shifts emotional labor away from informal ties. You can see the map changing in small, practical choices. Who you text first about bad news, who you decline plans for because you need childcare help, and who you invite to milestones reveal the new wiring. These micro-behaviors follow cause and effect logic. New needs and routines create new touchpoints, and the people who respond effectively become core. The shift isn't a judgment on anyone. It's an adaptation, a gradual reallocation of trust and time toward relationships that fit this chapter of life. New internal narratives, the stories that start to fit. There is that uneasy moment when the thoughts you used to have about yourself start to trip over the choices you're actually making. You catch yourself finishing sentences in a different way. Actions create pressure on words, and words bend to fit actions so you don't feel split in two. For example, someone who used to shrug off weekends by saying first never stick to plans will start booking morning studio time and, after a few Saturdays in a row, begin to say out loud, first am someone who keeps creative time. The new phrase isn't decoration. It closes the gap between what they do and what they think they are. Often memories get retold in a way that makes the new story smoother. Past failures become learning chapters, not proof of incapacity. A person leaving a long job might begin telling friends that the role taught me where first want to spend energy, instead of framing it as wasted time, because that reinterpretation reduces regret and makes the next steps clearer. By reshaping earlier events, the mind creates continuity. Cause and effect line up, so moving forward feels less risky. Language itself starts to change, and that's a strong signal. Pronouns shift, verbs harden, and qualifiers drop away. Where there used to be maybe and first should, you hear first choose and first will, which then shapes daily decisions. Think of someone pivoting from a corporate path to freelancing. When they swap first have to network for first want to connect with these people, they begin to schedule different meetings and decline others. The new wording channels attention and action. You begin testing the story out on others, and their responses tighten or loosen that narrative. Saying first am writing a book to a friend invites specific questions and support, which creates small obligations and confirmations that reinforce the identity. Small behaviors follow: showing up at coffee shops with a notebook, filling calendar slots with drafts, introducing yourself differently at events. Those external reactions feed back into the internal script, making it feel more real. Emotional tone shifts in predictable ways when a new narrative fits. Relief or steadiness replaces constant tension because your internal explanations now predict your behavior correctly. In contrast, persistent guilt or anxiety often signals a mismatch between story and action, like someone who calls themselves adventurous but avoids plans that feel new. When the story and behavior align, decisions become easier and mood stabilize, which then encourages more choices consistent with the new narrative. Decision pressure and momentum. Small choices that push you forward. The moment when tiny decisions start piling up feels oddly heavy, and that's normal. Research and everyday experience show that early choices create pressure because they set direction. One short click to unsubscribe from a newsletter can cut down daily noise. A longer decision, like replying to a recruiting message, creates a chain of commitments that forces you to reconsider routines. Those small acts reduce ambiguity and make the next step clearer. Decision pressure often comes from limited attention and competing priorities, so the smallest option can become the lever that moves everything else. Saying yes to a weekend class means rearranging the commute, childcare, or sleep schedule. Saying no to 3 extra meetings frees a 2-hour block that suddenly looks usable. Those immediate consequences change what you can and cannot do next, and that creates momentum, both because time opens up and because your brain registers progress. Psychological mechanisms explain why momentum often follows small choices. Psychologists talk about small wins and the power of implementation intentions. Simple plans like, if 10th happens, then first we'll do Y, to turn vague goals into actions. For example, deciding to pack 1 box this evening makes packing tangible. Once that box is done, the next one looks easier. Telling a friend you'll finish an application acts like a social anchor. The external acknowledgement increases follow-through and reduces the chance of backtracking. Concrete everyday examples show the ripple effect clearly. Replying to a hiring email can lead to a phone screen, then to preparing for an interview, then to negotiating a contract that shifts finances and living arrangements. Clearing out a single drawer can spark a weekend of decluttering, which makes a spare room useful, and suddenly the idea of hosting guests feels feasible. Each small, concrete choice lowers the activation energy for the next move. Pressure can also push in the wrong direction if the choices are poorly timed or too many at once. Decision fatigue, when mental resources for making choices are depleted, makes snap concessions more likely, like agreeing to commitments that don't align with longer-term plans. Breaking large transitions into specific, bite-sized decisions tends to prevent that. Choosing one concrete task avoids the paralysis that can happen when a whole future seems to hang on a single ambiguous decision. Over time, the cumulative effect of small choices creates a narrative you can feel and describe to others. Picking a route to work, choosing a new hobby, offering help on a project, each of these is a sentence in a new chapter. The pressure of deciding shrinks as patterns solidify, and momentum becomes the quieter force that keeps you moving forward without having to wrestle with the big picture question at every turn. You wake up and something feels off. Maybe your sleep is lighter, you skip the same old show, you clear out a drawer, or you find yourself smiling about a hobby you haven't touched in years. When routines, emotions, social patterns, and small decisions all shift at once, those are the concrete signals that a new phase is starting. Maybe it hit you as a tiny annoyance. You start saying no to the Friday plans you used to love, you choose to save money rather than spend, or you take a different route to work. Those small, repeated choices show your priorities are changing, and because you act differently in ordinary moments, your life begins to tilt towards something new. You don't have to have an answer yet. If you're curious, there's a next video that walks through practical, low-stakes experiments, trying a short class, testing a new morning routine, or asking one trusted person for honest feedback that help you turn signals into clearer steps before making a big decision. It will feel awkward at first. Small frictions like a reshuffled weekend or a different evening habit make room for different work, relationships, and energy over time. And First will be here with more stories and simple tools as you notice those nudges and decide what to try next.